Welcome to Red Deer Public Library's Travel Memories program for June. My name's Priscilla, and my programming partner, Donna, and I started Travel Memories in September 2013 in person at the downtown branch of Red Deer Public Library. This season, we were able to continue virtually thanks to help from many library staff members. The past years made me appreciate what a great team we have here. A special thanks to a very patient Alyssa, who's helped me in so many ways. This Travel Memories program exists because of the wonderful people who are willing to share their travel memories and pictures with us. Anyone who has put together a slideshow of a trip will appreciate what a commitment that is, and doing it virtually is an added challenge. So repeat presenters are very special indeed. And we'd like to welcome back Anita and Jane for the 4th time. Can you believe it, ladies?
No.
They last talked about hiking in Scotland in November 2020, last fall. And that trip is still available on the library's YouTube channel if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, including you, Anita. No, This time they're going to talk about hiking in the time of COVID. And they will share their experiences camping last summer when they learned about tenting and hiking and campfire meals during a pandemic. This topic really fits well with this year's Summer Reading Club theme, Out and About. And we just launched it this week. This is the bookmark that you can fill in. And enjoy your reading pleasure all summer long. And hopefully Anita and Jane's talk today will inspire you to answer one of these questions. And so we have it for adults, and we also have it for, you see up on the top shelf there, there's a kids book bingo in English and French, and also a teen one. So, and more information about this is available on the library's website, and you can actually print off these bookmarks too, or you can pick one up at any branch of the library. Something to look forward to this summer, just starting this week. So, really like to welcome you ladies. How are you today?
Good, thanks.
Good. Thanks, Priscilla.
You have found a cool spot to hang out to do this with us. That's great. For people watching this live, if you have questions or comments, you can include those in the comment section at the bottom of the Facebook Live screen. And at the end of the talk, I will share those with the ladies. So some tough questions would be good. Anyway, now because we're doing this through Zoom and Facebook Live, I'm going to share with Jane the hosting duties so that she can share her screen.
So Anita's going to start us off, and both of us will be chiming in with things we remember as we go through our little presentation.
Yes, so we're going to be talking about our summer of 2020, which was camping and hiking in the time of COVID. I guess it could be camping and hiking in the time of COVID this year too. Now, maybe there are people joining us today who are much more sophisticated campers than we are and know a lot more than we do. We've certainly camped for a number of years, but not on a consistent basis. So this was option B when all of our summer plans were upended.
And I just want to comment on this picture. This would have been our 3rd outing of the summer in 2020. And as you'll see, we were car campers.
So as Priscilla said, we've presented before. Jane and I are sister-in-laws, and quite a few years ago, we started doing long distance international hikes together. And of course, to train for those hikes, we have done a lot of hiking in Alberta. In fact, we have a walking resume that starts with our first long distance walk, which was in 2007 when we did the Portuguese Camino. And we pretty well continued to plan a long distance hike ever since, including 2020 when we were going to do the Dingle Way in Ireland. And that, of course, is postponed. They still have our deposit, and we'll get there. We've started the hikes that we have for the library. So last year, what we had expected, you know, up until we would be doing was hiking with the Red Deer Ramblers. That's the hiking club we belong to. Go on hikes every other along the way of schedule, and subsequently have hiked and canceled the 2021 schedule. The other things that we postponed, as we had planned to hike the Skyline Trail in Jasper, staying overnight at a lodge, a backcountry lodge, and we canceled that. And as I already mentioned, we postponed rather our trip to Ireland. Nothing is actually canceled, it's all postponed. So when we talked about it, what we would do for 2020, since we couldn't do what we had planned, we decided that a small group of us that hike fairly regularly together, there's 4, could camp and hike, and we would be careful about following Alberta health guidelines. So it's pretty easy to social, and we all had individual tents. So normally we would share tents, but not in COVID time. We agreed that we would not carpool because we're all in different households. So all 4 of us drove 4 cars to all of our hikes. We decided we wouldn't share it, but we would all bring our own food. And we would also do our best to avoid crowded places and try and find places that are a little bit off the beaten track so that we weren't, you know, sometimes seeing many people throughout the course of the day. And we wanted to avoid doing that. We were all very cautious about COVID and wanted to have a good time and keep ourselves and everyone else safe.
And I just want to comment on this picture, which was from Cypress Hills. And it was a little damp the weekend we went to Cypress Hills. So that was practice with our tarping technology.
So we set out to make a plan. We knew we'd have to book in advance because camping got really popular in 2020. So we decided to go to Cypress Hills in June. The thinking was that that part of the province tends to be a little bit warmer, and we thought it might be a little bit drier. It wasn't, but anyway, that's Alberta. We decided to go to the Crow's Nest Pass in July because we really never explored that area. So it would be new for us. In August, we were going to Indian Graves, into a more remote campground where we thought we would be off the beaten track, and we were definitely off the beaten track. Then in August, actually it was beginning of September, we went to Shadow Lake Lodge because that was, as we'll tell you, a little bit of a last minute event because restrictions were lessening at that particular point in time. And then we were going to go to Lake Louise in September, shoulder season. Lake Louise is always busy, but a little less so in September. Because as I mentioned, we wanted to reserve our campsites. We didn't want to drive all the way down to the southeast corner of the province to Cypress Hills and not have a camping place. So if you go on to the Alberta Parks website and look at campgrounds and then select reservable campgrounds, you get a map that looks something like this with a whole bunch of little tents all over the place. And you can click on a tent and find the campsite and get details about it. Then looking at the specific campsite, we could pick sites that we wanted. Generally, what we were looking for was sites that were adjacent to each other so that we were beside each other rather than spread around, because we needed, at least to start with, we needed 4 individual campsites. At the when the campsites opened up, parks would only allow 1 household per campsite, and at that time they also required an empty campsite between every occupied campsite. So we ended up with 4 campsites in Elkwater spread out with an empty campsite in between. We felt really, really distanced.
So for all of our option B plans, we were with the same 4 people. So they became our small hiking bubble or hiking cohort. And so here you have a picture of the 3 of the 4 of us social distancing at our second hiking event of the summer in the Crow's Nest Pass. The 4th member of our hiking cohort was, of course, taking the picture. So this was the team that executed on our plan. And in June of 2020, we headed to Cypress Hills. And it was not what we expected, in that we had planned the southeast corner of Alberta for June, counting on dry weather. And it was a bit of a moist weekend. So, but Elkwater Lake is a beautiful location for families. We saw people fishing, definitely a lot of bird watching, and a favorite of ours in the little community there was, at the time, a coffee shop that was serving takeout coffee, which we found if we could purchase our coffees instead of making our cowboy coffee, it got us off to a smoother start in the morning. We're really walkers, or in Alberta, hikers. So we're not qualified campers. We're not expert campers. So we try to make everything as convenient as possible for us. And This is Anita out in the rain. Clearly, the picture taker's in the slightly drier tent, watching Anita on the fire pit there, reheating our dinners. As Anita said, we had 4 campsites for 4 people because we felt that was following the rules of the time. The campsite had on their, or following their part of the directives, had an empty campsite between every reserved campsite. And because of the weather, you can see behind Anita all kinds of empty campsites where we camped in Cypress Hills. So our hiking plan revolved around the campground we were staying at. And we had a lovely downhill walk to the water and the little community down there. And we took many trips down and then back up the hill to our campsite just to enjoy the lake and watch the birds, catch the sunset over the lake. And the rest of our hiking at this location was joining together the multiple small paths that wind through this recreational area. So we were able to make some loops, and we did visit a historical, like small historical museum of the area, as well as a hostel in the area. And we were our furthest point out on one of our day hikes here, and the rain came down, and you know, your choice is to get back home. And so we were pretty wet when we got back to the campsite. But the beautiful part of car camping is we could all really dry off in our vehicles. So it wasn't that much of a hardship. Just, you know, rain just doesn't add to the fun when you're camping, even if you are car camping. So as a first outing, worked out really well for us. We like this area. We have come out to Cypress Hills to snowshoe in the winter and enjoy that as well. This felt like a lovely camping area to bring family, especially young kids. And yeah, we enjoyed it. The weather would have definitely improved our feelings about our first outing in June. So the next destination was Crow's Nest Pass, and this was in July, and the weather definitely cooperated. We also had the knowledge we had built up from our first outing, and the benefit of car camping is if you think you might need something to improve on your camping experience, there's almost always room in your car to bring your things along. The Crow's Nest Pass area, from our hiking perspective, is very much sharing the trail with ATV users, bikes, and I believe some of the trails we were on were equestrian trails. So we got quite a kick out of the signage for all the different transportation options available on the trails in this area, with the little stick man hiking at the end of the orange post. The Crow's Nest Pass area has some spectacular hikes of the kind that we like to do. For us, that means about 10 to 15 kilometers a day. elevation gain, you know, in the 300 to 700 meters, total gain and loss. And so we did do 2 rather large hikes while we were there. The first hike was to a plane crash site. I believe it's the North York plane crash site. And we did not have a good map of the Crow's Nest area for walking. And so our 12-kilometer day grew to about a 20-kilometer day. And one of the first things we did was get off on our hike on the wrong side of a creek. And we're going along on what felt like maybe a logging road. And, you know, as we did, we were looking around, not really paying attention to where we were walking, until one of us looked down and saw these prints in the slightly wet, muddy road. And we realized that a bear had gone up this road, maybe on a slightly wetter day. We didn't feel like we were following this bear that closely, but clearly he had been up this way ahead of us. So at this point, we studied as best we could our brochure that we were hiking with, and realized we needed to backtrack at this point and go up the other side of the creek if we were going to make it to our destination, which was this plane crash from many years ago. So this Dakota plane crashed in 1946. It had a 7-man crew on board, and it was going from Comox, BC to Nova Scotia. It's amazing that after all these years, you can still see a lot of debris from the plane crash. It was a little sad to us as a group that this sign has weathered poorly, because we really felt it's important that people understand what this site is when you get there. I mentioned that we're on multi-use trails, and without a good map, we had a lot of fun talking to a lot of ATVers as we made our way up to the site, asking how much further do we have to go? And interestingly enough, if you're on an ATV, the distance we had left to go to get to the site was always very short. You're almost there, it's just a little further, it's just around the bend. But actually we had quite a ways to go with all that feedback. Here's a picture of some of the wreckage. There's a big mountain behind the wreckage. There are some crosses on the ground for the people who passed away at this site. And it stays with you, your visit to this location. As well as doing this hike, which was a full day, we also did another hike to Window Mountain Lake. And that hike involved a very long drive down an unmaintained gravel road. And again, we had quite a fabulous hike. It is a multi-use trail again. And because we were walkers, the ATVers were passing us because they only had to do the very last part of that hike. So our experience in the Crow's Nest Pass with hiking is you're definitely sharing the trail. Everybody's very friendly and respectful, but sometimes you're a little sad that you're the walker and not having the nice ride on some of the more boring parts.
So our next adventure, we wanted to get off the beaten track, and we went to a place called Indian Graves Provincial Recreation Area. So that's not a provincial park. It is off the beaten track. It's about 30 kilometers of gravel road west of Longview. And in fact, we were the only campers there. We saw a couple of RVs, but hardly any people. And we were the only hikers. As we were walking down the road, when we arrived, we decided we'd find our trailhead for the next day. We were going to do Indian Graves Ridge. And as we're walking down the road, we saw this, what appeared to be an old cemetery. There were no monuments in the cemetery, but there was a cross and it was fenced. And as you can see, it's very overgrown with fireweed. And it just happened that when we were there, there was a man who stopped at the same spot who used to live in the area. And so we asked him if he knew anything about this cemetery. And he said that tradition held that many years ago, an Indigenous man and his daughter had been buried there. We also asked him if that was where the name Indian Graves came from, and he didn't think so. He thought that it was because the ridge, Indian Graves Ridge, was a traditional Indigenous burial site from, many, many years ago. When you look at any of the information about this area, it doesn't give you any hints as to the origin of the name. So this is Indian Graves Ridge, and it was actually a great ridge walk. We simply had to hike up to the top of the ridge. You can see the trail there on the right-hand side of our first break site. We usually have break 1 and break 2 when we're hiking. It was a gorgeous day, and there was no one else to be seen. We were alone in the world. We also had no cell phone coverage. The cell phone coverage is 30 kilometers back on Highway 22. So it's a really good place to have a map. And we did have a map here. And for quite a ways, we had, a pretty distinct trail. But then periodically the trail was overgrown, and we sort of had to guess where it was. As Jane said, we were, intending to be really good with social distancing, but when 3 of you are consulting on a map, it's a little tough to keep your distance. We spent quite a bit of time hauling the map out to try and figure out where we were. We weren't worried about getting lost. We knew we could always hike back up the ridge if we needed to. But this is just a picture of the map. And when there's no signs at all on the trail, it can be a little interesting to follow a map like this. I mean, it says 3.8 kilometers, but we had a GPS. You can have 3 GPSs on the trail and they all come out with a different kilometer. So we were trying to figure out where the turnaround site was, and we made it back safely. All was well.
Yeah. And it's because these are not like going to the Kananaskis during the time of COVID, where you're going to pass a lot of hikers and you can ask them where your turnaround point is. We did not see anyone else hiking this day.
And that's a photo from our campsite at night. It was a gorgeous evening, and if we wanted to be alone in the world, we certainly felt like we were alone in the world when we were there. Except for the fact that there were quite a few cows in and around. We're right beside a creek, and we weren't particularly worried about bears because we thought probably they would go after the cows before they would want to tackle us. We always carry bear spray. We're careful about bears.
So after our 3 camping experiences, our 3 car camping experiences, and as everyone remembers, during the summer last year, the restrictions around COVID were always changing. So we were opening up a little bit more towards August and September of last year, and the opportunity showed up for us to be able to book into Shadow Lake Lodge. Backcountry lodges are amazing. They're such a fabulous experience to have in the Canadian Rockies. And we do like to try to get to as many, on our bucket list is to try to get to as many backcountry lodges as we can. And sometimes getting to a backcountry lodge like Shadow Lake Lodge is difficult because international and US hikers also like coming to Canadian backcountry lodges. And so a last minute window of opportunity showed up for us to go to Shadow Lake Lodge, and we took it. We felt we had earned a glamping opportunity. And so just backcountry lodges, you tend to have your meals included in what your lodge fee is. So generally that includes tea when you show up from hiking, followed by a dinner. The next day you included is a breakfast, and then there's generally a bag lunch. So it is, you are getting your bed for the night and all these meals, but you're looking in the neighborhood for Shadow Lake Lodge of $350 a night. They're not cheap, but they are.
It's $350 a night each.
Yes, so even though you're sharing, and we shared a cabin, yeah, it's a big monetary commitment. So given that we had no other travel planned that year, we decided to take this opportunity. So Shadow Lake Lodge is roughly between Sunshine, when you're going west on Highway 1, between the Sunshine turnoff and the Lake Louise turnoff. So we start from the Red Earth parking lot, and we begin up a trail, and you can see there's all kinds of options on this trail. There's lots of people who do serious backpacking on this trail. We were taking one of the easier options. And along the trail we go, it's reasonably busy. It's nicely busy so that you don't feel like you're out in the wilderness completely alone, but you also, you know, have lots of time by yourself. And hiking up the trail we go, and we run into this little fellow on the right. And he is, I'm sorry, some fabulous bird people are going to know exactly what kind of a grouse he is. But he was very possessive of his piece of the trail. And he talked to us, and he stood in our way, and he was not at all intimidated by us. Anita made it by pretty good with some pole action from her walking poles to just keep him at the distance. But he did manage to give me a good old peck on the ankle as I went by. And interestingly enough, he was still fighting for his territory when we walked out, but a little less aggressive than on our way in. So the lodge was originally, the original lodge building is the building under the Canadian flag. And it goes back to the early 1920s. That lodge is kind of now a lounge for the people who stay at Shadow Lake. On the right-hand side is what today is the dining room. While we were there, as long as they had family units in the dining room, they were able to accommodate people eating in the dining room, following all of the rules of the day. Our cabin was the one just to the left where you see the person sitting. That's actually me sitting outside of our little cabin. We took the option to have our meals on our front porch. And so every one of our meals we were able to have really well social distanced from everybody else who was there. So a great opportunity there. That's just a close-up of the same picture of our little cabin, and you can see right through to the cabin. That's the whole thing. There's 2 beds and a little bathroom area, and that's the entire cabin. And that's our big dining table where we had all of our meals brought to us, which was just lovely. And because of our location, going past us, there are several other cabins, 7 or 8 other cabins. So we didn't feel isolated from what was happening in camp while we were there. We sort of had this lovely safely distanced viewing of all of the campsite activities. We went in one day, generally at a backcountry lodge. Your minimum is a 2-night stay. So you walk in on your first day, and that was about 14 kilometers. That's the majority of your day. We did some looking around after we had left our packs at our cabin. But then the next day you have the opportunity to go for a longer hike. And so we wanted to find 2 National Park red chairs that we knew were near in the vicinity of Shadow Lake. And so we spent the day looking for these chairs, and we knew they were on the trail we were on, but we didn't know where. And so we walked to the end, which was right into the base of that mountain, didn't see any chairs. We're walking back out a little disappointed of how we could have missed them. And we just catch a glimpse of the red chairs. And we would have missed them very early on the trail. they were out on a peninsula into the lake. And so if you didn't know to turn right there, you wouldn't know that these elusive red chairs were to be seen. And so here at the end of a very long day's hike, we were able to get our pictures taken at the red chairs.
So our last camping of the summer was to go to Lake Louise in September. As I mentioned, it's shoulder season, and we thought maybe the crowds would have decreased somewhat. And of course, Lake Louise is always fabulous. The campground that's at Lake Louise, right adjacent to the village, is a beautiful campground. It is fully fenced with electric fencing because it is on a wildlife corridor and other animals out of the campsite, which keeps the animals safe, of course. So you can feel quite secure, if you like, in that campsite. Of course, there are lots and lots of hiking places at Lake Louise. It's a place that we've been many times. It's a favorite. It's almost somehow every year we have to get to Lake Louise and do one or two of our favorite hikes. We had really amazing weather, and we picked really well for our date to get the larches in all of their glory. We had never done Larch Valley, and so that was on the list. And it's not a really long hike. It's not a hard hike. It's really probably a moderate hike. And we went a little later in the day. We went actually when we arrived at Lake Louise. So we started hiking maybe 3 in the afternoon, which really a lot of the crowds had gone. There's a lot of people who go to Larch Valley for the sunrise, to see the sunrise on the lake, on the larches. So a lot of those people had gone, and it was pretty quiet for us. We got a really good look at a deer who was not particularly alarmed that we were there. And as I said, a lot of views of the larches. But when you're in Lake Louise, you can pretty well see larches everywhere you go, not just Larch Valley. This is just another later day, and when the clouds had come in, photograph of us. You can see how nicely distanced we are on that particular photograph. So looking back, what we would say what worked for us was booking adjacent campsites worked, and then using one as our kitchen site so we could share one campfire. Another thing that worked for us, because we like to spend our time hiking, was to bring easy to prepare campfire food, foil dinners that we pre-cooked sausages and then put some red and green peppers or onions or things like that, or rice into a foil package, and then all we had to do was heat it up. Or something like chili that was in a foil container that could be heated up. Keeping life easy for ourselves, able to put our feet up and not do the dishes. Another thing we learned, and I would have to say we learn this all the time, we really need to have maps and pay attention to them. We've never actually gotten lost, but we've done a fair bit of backtracking because we haven't paid close enough attention to our maps and gotten off like we did in the Crow's Nest Pass on the wrong side of the creek and had to walk you know, 4 or 5 kilometers back to the bridge. And we also found that car camping works well for us. You can bring as much stuff as you need. Jane and I have backpacked. We know what it's like to pack the bare minimum, because you have to be very cognizant of the weight you're carrying. And of course, it has its own pleasure, but car camping gives you an out. You can always warm up in the car when you hit a really rainy day and everything is soaked. So this is our opinionated summary. The Cypress Hills, very pretty place, but the trails don't really suit our kind of hiking, because we like destinations, walking to a plane crash site, walking to a waterfall, walking to a summit. The Crow's Nest Pass is a place we would go back to. The trails are not well marked there, and we didn't have good maps, but we could probably address that. Indian Ridge was okay. We did that. It was a great experience, but aside from the ridge, we would have had to drive quite a ways to get to other trailheads. Shadow Lake, well, it's lovely to stay in a backcountry lodge where they have down duvets and 3-course dinners and all that kind of thing. It is costly. And Lake Louise, well, Lake Louise is always wonderful. But mid-September is getting a little late for us for camping. It's dark early and it gets cold early too.
So coming up for us this year, we have booked some more car camping opportunities. June this year, we're set to go to David Thompson country and west of Red Deer. And we plan to hike Wild Horse Creek. 2 of the 4 of our hiking cohort have done this hike once, and we're prepared to do it again because the other 2 really want to do it. It's quite a special hike. It's very different than a lot of hikes we do in David Thompson country. The terrain's a little unusual. You go through some sand or scree sand, however you want to refer to it. So we have that on the books for June. Our Jasper trip from 2020 to hike the Skyline Trail and stay at Shovel Pass Lodge, which will tick the box for 2021 of a backcountry lodge. That trip from 2020 is rescheduled to this July. So we're looking forward to taking that on. It is a big hike for us. We will be 20 to 24 kilometers into the lodge and then out the next day. Luckily for us, there's a lodge in the middle, so we don't have to carry food, we don't have to carry bedding, but we are already practicing getting back in shape from our winter to be ready for that. We lucked out again, I believe, because it's hard for international travelers and US travelers to book backcountry lodges. We are doubling up this year on lodges. Also because our opportunity to travel internationally and hike is a bit limited this year as well. Not knowing which countries are open and what that's going to look like, and quarantining and not quarantining. we have doubled up on backcountry lodges this year. So that's very exciting for us. We have a plan for hitting Yoho National Park to take on some of the trails a little bit further west than we normally get. And last year we had wanted to do Castle, I think it used to be Castle Wilderness, but now it's Castle Provincial Park. And we missed our opportunity, so it's back on the list for this year. And finally, our hike that should have happened, our international long distance hike that should have happened in 2020 is penciled in on the books for 2022, and that's to hike the Dingle Peninsula in Ireland.
So I'm back hosting again, and now I get to ask you some questions.
Yeah.
So the Cypress Hills, that was the only place that looks like you had rain, was the Cypress Hills. The rest of the time you picked good weather.
We did.
Very lucky, because as everybody in Alberta knows who's trying to book recreation within Alberta, you have to get on the websites early to make things happen. And who knows with our weather what you're going to get.
Yeah, that's for sure. So your pictures are lovely. Did you have a special camera?
We usually use our phones.
They're nice and portable.
One less thing to carry.
That's right.
We didn't actually realize we would end up doing a talk. One of our hiking cohorts does bring a real camera along, and a few of the best pictures are definitely hers, and the rest is cell phone pictures. So
got to do what works, right? So speaking of that, did you have any equipment issues or equipment revelations about tents and whatnot?
We're fairly well equipped with, I did buy a new tent last year, and because we all had to have our own tents, and I didn't have a tent. But otherwise, we pretty well have everything. I think you're always learning a little bit about a few adaptations. I think one of the things we did learn in the Cypress Hills, where we got really drenched, was you really do need to have backup warm clothing. Otherwise, you end up with clothing strung all over your car, trying to dry it with the heater on high. It's not that efficient.
No. Well, I have fond memories of Cypress Hills because my family they do, where the whole group gets together there. They have some really good group campsites. Then, as you said, it's great for kids and swim in the lake and all that. So, but you went back and snowshoed, you said, so.
Yeah, we've been down there in the winter and snowshoed, and it's great snowshoeing country.
I know that when we went in the winter, we drove through from Calgary to Cypress Hills. There was no snow on the ground, and then you get to Cypress Hills and there was lots of snow because just because of the increased elevation.
Yeah. It's such an interesting place because it's an anomaly out in the middle of the prairie there. Yeah?
It is, with all the pine trees and the spruce trees. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely worth the visit for sure.
So the next one you went to was Indian Graves Ridge, or so how did you actually hear about that one, since it is so off the beaten path?
Well, actually, one of our other hiking cohorts. We had planned to go to, where did we plan to go?
Well, Chain Lakes.
We were going to go to Chain Lakes, which is right off Highway 22. And then one of the other members of our cohort said she knew about Indian Waves because it's one of the places where the management of the campground is contracted out. So it's not managed by Alberta Parks, it's managed by a contractor. And she happened to know the contractor who manages the campground. But, you know, we could have also found it on the map, but by looking for it too.
Sometimes you don't see things until they're pointed out though, right?
Well, you know, talking to other people or who you know, or who knows who, is always a great way to find out,
Yes,
to find
word of mouth.
ideas,
Yeah.
find places, yeah.
So in the Crow's Nest, you said that if you went back, you would have better maps. Where would you go to get maps for Crow's Nest? Did you come up with a solution to that?
We rely in the sort of west of Red Deer and Calgary. We rely on gem maps.
Okay.
And
we just didn't have that.
There actually isn't a gem map for the area. There is not a there's not a government produced, at least, yeah, at least if there is, we haven't been able to find it. I think we would stop at the Tourist Information Center and see what we could, I mean, you know, that's a step we missed. I think it was closed because of COVID.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, that, you know, because usually we do go to places like that and they'll give you maps and give you information and tell you about, you know,
Where the bears are.
Where the bears are,
and all kinds of things. Where the bears are, you know, they're always great people to discuss what's a good trail, this is what we're looking for, that kind of thing. I think they were closed, weren't they, Jane?
Yeah. You know, the fluctuation in the rules and regulations that, you know, happen in the pandemic, we were always working as best we could with what was allowed at the time.
Yeah, had to be very flexible. So it was I hadn't heard about Shadow Lake Lodge before, although I have hiked there from the Red Earth parking lot, so I didn't realize that was there. That was another nice find. So you talked about the 3-course meals. What kind of food did they feed you?
Oh, for some reason I can't remember.
I think we might have had pot roast one night, but we would have had a starter, like a salad, and then the meat and potatoes, and then chocolate cake for dessert, and something like that. And of course, they're licensed, so you can have wine or beer with dinner. And then breakfast, we had a choice, like you got a little menu and you can pick what you want, hand the menu into the staff, and then they would bring the meal to us. So like at dinner, they would come with the starter, come and take away the dishes, bring the main, come and take away the dishes, bring dessert, come and take away the dishes. They should have had Fitbits on if they didn't, because they were putting on the miles.
Yeah, I think when we go to a backcountry lodge, my favorite meal so far at all the backcountry lodges is the tea that they serve when you show up, because it is like cheeses. It's like a charcuterie board, you know, plus cookies and all kinds of wonderful things. And they're amazing. All of them, the teas that you show up to when you arrive, are just awesome.
There's some of the lodges will allow people that are just in for a day hike to purchase tea and goodies. You know, you'd have to find out from each place if they'll allow that.
Do you have to book it ahead or something?
No, No, you usually just ask when you get there if they are, if they allow that. Like Lake O'Hara always has allowed people to purchase tea. I think Skokie does. Anyway, because we've seen other people that have come and
Done that.
done that.
Yeah, I didn't even think about doing that. So you talked about the National Park red chairs, and I don't know what that really is, except are they hidden chairs that people are supposed to look for?
Yeah, they ran a program where they have placed 2 red chairs in very iconic locations throughout all of the national parks.
You can Google Parks Canada red chairs and find out where they are.
Okay.
And some of them are in very obvious places, like at the top of Tunnel Mountain in Banff. Really easy to find. And others are in more obscure locations. And I think there's, I don't know, like 100 different sets of red chairs. It was it done for one of the, one of the special
Canada 150 or something, maybe?
Yeah, it's something.
Yes,
I think
Okay,
yeah.
now maybe it's ringing a bell with me. Yeah, okay. Well, it's good that they're still there. Add to the bucket list.
Yeah, they're fun to find, especially when they're not obvious.
Yes, yeah. Had to hunt a little harder for them.
We didn't know that there were red chairs there, and then somebody mentioned it to us. And so, but I think you can look on the website and find out where they all are.
Okay, something for people to look to
Some
do.
people make it a goal to find them all.
Yeah. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing your last summer. Made it an inspiring summer for us all. It could be all negative, but quite positive. Hopefully people will get out to do these things. I just want to mention that this is the last talk of this season. We'll be back again in September. September 8th, which is actually the second Wednesday of the month, because the first is the 1st of September, and we decided we'd wait till after the long weekend to start Travel Memories program. And we'll be having Dale Leckie talk about his new book, Scenic Geology of Alberta, a roadside touring and hiking guide. So that kind of continues with the theme. And also September is Alberta Culture Days. So that's one talk that we'll have with Alberta Culture Days, and there'll be other things like that to look forward to in September. So I don't know how to thank you enough, but it's been wonderful.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
It's our pleasure.
I think
thank you. It was wonderful to actually think about what we had done last summer and celebrate it.
Does it seem like a long time ago?
Always.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely inspired us all to get out and about this summer, like our summer reading club theme.
I'm going to get one of those and see what the quizzes are.
Yes, well, and when you fill in the options on here, then you can enter your name for some prizes.
Oh, good. Well, thank you, Priscilla. You know, I'm a big fan of the Red Deer Public Library, so I'm always happy to participate.
We really appreciate it. And Jane's all the way from Calgary, too.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much for the opportunity. Thanks, Priscilla.
Okay, we'll see y'all in the fall.